everyone, and welcome back. I'm Heather Stamper, and today is a mega book talk day. Happy Christmas Eve. Happy Jolabokflod. What is Jolabokflod, you might ask? Well, it's a tradition that my husband and I really like, and it comes from Iceland. Nobody in the family is Icelandic, but we like this tradition anyway, so we decided to make it our own. So there. What it is on Christmas Eve, you give your friends and family members books on Christmas Eve and chocolate. Already two things that are awesome, chocolate and books, right? And then you spend the rest of the evening reading and eating chocolate. And then on Christmas morning, you get together and you talk about what you read. It's like Christmassy book club time. I love it, right? So we've been doing that for the last couple of years. And so if you're interested in Jolabokflod, then I have a whole bunch of book reviews because I know I've been kind of slack on the video upload department. I'm working on that. Life gets in the way sometimes, yeah. But I wanted to share with you a whole bunch of books so that if you're interested in doing a Jolabokflod yourself, you have lots of options and, of course, pick your own. We all have our favorites. So let's get started. So the first book that I want to talk about is a book and a web series, and it's a webtoon. It is Lore Olympus. 5 bookmarks, and here I'll tell you why. Lore Olympus is written by Rachel Smythe. It started as a webtoon, and then it got picked up by this group called Helvetica Dubs on YouTube, and they did like a voiceover reading of the images, and it is super awesome, super cute. My husband got into it as well. They even released a video that just happened to fall on the same day as our anniversary, so it's meant to be, right? Now, I know that there is some criticism about Lore Olympus, and we'll get into that in a moment. Lore Olympus is basically an updated retelling of the Greek mythology pantheon, focused centrally on the Hades and Persephone relationship. And this is where the controversy comes in. It's just like, oh, you're romanticizing. Hello, Gigi. You're romanticizing, Stockholm syndrome. And I have to say that the creator of the webtoon is very sensitive to those concerns. She updates, when she updates her webtoon, she always puts whether the trigger warning, it's like if proceed with caution because it deals with things about abuse and family dynamics and family dysfunction, which if you're any way familiar with Greek mythology, oh yes, the family dysfunction is for real. So, but it's really well told. And it's not just her Hades and Persephone. You've got Cupid Eros and Psyche. You've got Hera and Zeus. You've got Demeter, and you have Apollo, and you have all those characters and interwoven throughout the story. And so I think it's a very clever author craft. I like the design of the images. It has a very kind of like watercolor, blocky color schemes, kind of similar to some of the 50s and 60s Disney and Warner Brothers cartoons, where they kind of went kind of like that pop abstract phase. And so they have that in there. If you go to Helvetica Dubs and watch some of theirs, the voice actors do a really cute job. And it's really neat to watch them grow into the roles. It's like you can see how they developed their craft and stuff. So yes, go to Webtoons and support Rachel Smythe. Go support Helvetica Dubs. They finished season 1 of Lore Olympus, and they don't plan on doing season 2 because of projects and possible copyright reasons. It's a thing. So, but hey, I respect and love them. And so by all means, go support. Rachel Smythe now has a book of the entire season 1 of Lore Olympus. And I say season when I mean series. you get what I mean. So by all means, go check it out. If you like mythology, if you like fantasy, if you like complicated romance, go for it. And you won't be sorry, I promise. Okay. The next one that I want to share with you is called The Wolf and the Woodsman. And I had picked this up because it was part of my Pop Sugar reading challenge for a book that was published in the year 2021. And I had it tagged as, oh, if you like Naomi Novik and you like Eastern European fairy tales, this is a good book for you. It's by Ava Reed. And yeah, it's got some elements. I kind of figured from just based by the very nature of the title that it was going to be more like Little Red Riding Hood and the Huntsman and the wolf, and that's not exactly what happened there, which is not a bad thing. It's just like it took it in a direction that I completely didn't think of. But it was not probably my favorite in comparison to the Naomi Novik and the Marissa Myers and things like that there. I give it 3 bookmarks because it has the potential of being a series, and I don't want to, poo-poo on the rest of the series when I don't know what that is. So the basic synopsis is there's this girl named Vicky who lives in a pagan village where everybody's got some kind of magical ability. It's like they can conjure fire, they can heal, they can do all sorts of stuff. They see visions. Not a Vicky. No. She is of a mixed race. She's her father is Yahuli, which wink, wink, nudge, nudge is a shout out to the Yiddish culture and heritage. And her mom was a pagan. So she didn't get any of that stuff. At least that's what everyone thought. Well, the people of the kingdom outside of the village, they have this group called the Holy Order of Woodsmen. They claim a pagan girl from the village every year to be part of the king's blood sacrifice. Yay! Because the king has this thing about, like Wiccan blood to help fortify the kingdom. Not much is known as to what happens to these girls once they leave the village. They kind of get cut off there. So this year they wanted a seer. Well, there's only 2 seers in the village. One is an older lady and the other one is her protege. And so the village wasn't too willing to give either of them up. So they dressed Vicky in the colors of a seer and said, here you go, hoping that by the time they catch wise that she's not anything, that it'll be too late. And oh, darn, oh, well, she was of no use to our village anyway. Nice, real nice. So, so she gets into kind of like this complex relationship with one of the woodsmen who turns out to be a prince. And it kind of reminds you of, like tensions between in like the 30s of Germany and the other Baltic nations in Eastern European nations versus the Jewish population. There's a lot of that tone. So in that respect, it's pretty good. It's like it's a good parallelism. I wasn't too keen on the whole romance aspect of it. It was a little heavy-handed for my taste, but it's just like as every other time she looked at the guy, she, is just like, oh, his rippling muscles, blah, 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 blah. It's like you were trying to mesh historical parallelism with Harlequin romance. And that's not exactly my thing, but if it's yours, by all means, go for it. It is definitely very interesting. And I may read the second book once it ever comes out so that I can, find out what happened there. So that's Wolf and the Woodsman. 3 bookmarks for that one. Midnight Riot by Aranovich. Now, this is the first of a series called The Rivers of London, or Peter Grant series. It's pretty funny. I have to say, if you like Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett type humor, you're probably going to be into this. It's about a constable named Peter Grant in the London Metropolitan Police. He gets wrapped up in this case where it should have been a pretty cut and dry murder case, but the one witness that he's able to pin down is no longer alive. It's like this 17th century Cockney guy, who never learned me letters, and so because of this, he gets assigned to the case progression unit, where he gets trained in like the supernatural crime division, pretty much what it is. So if you like supernatural, you're probably going to dig this too. There's lots of tongue-in-cheek humor about, like wizarding lore, like Harry Potter and stuff like that. So that's pretty funny. And apparently all of the rivers in England are tied to a nature spirit. And they all answer to Mama Thames, who has a kind of a Bahamian accent. I think is kind of nice. And how they go about wheeling and dealing to get these cases solved. It's pretty entertaining. So I liked it. When they come out with another one, I'll go and probably read that one too, because I kind of want to see the continuing adventures. Yeah. So I give that one 4 bookmarks. I also read or listened to, I did a little bit of both, Le Morte Artur, King Arthur and the Legends of the Round Table by Thomas Mallory. And I read this one because of the research that I was trying to do for one of my Mythmasters series, and I had never read it before. It's interesting, very interesting. I give this 3 bookmarks because unless you're really into Arthurian lore, you're probably not going to want to pick this one up. It is a little dry in comparison to what, passes for high fantasy these days, but it is, basically the origin story of King Arthur and Merlin and Morgan Le Fay and Morgause, and just that whole dynamic right there. I'm not going to go into the whole lore behind that because you've probably seen about 10,000 other movies and variations of the story, so we'll just leave it at that. I did find interesting that elements of the anime 7 Deadly Sins came from the Arthurian legends. There is a King Meliodas and a Queen Elizabeth, and so that was pretty interesting. There's a Bon from 7 Deadly Sins. He's a knighted character in there, and he's married to a lady named Elaine, who is his waifu in 7 Deadly Sins. So I just got kind of tickled by that. I was like, oh, that was a nice little nugget of surprise. So if you are interested in researching Arthurian legend, by all means, go for it. Le Morte Arthur. LibriVox does a nice rereading of the series. It's for free on YouTube. You can find that. The only drawback is that, since it is free, it's all volunteers reading the book. So some are better with pronunciations than others, and some have more background noise than others. But, it's like, hey, free audio book. I mean, what can you say? It's always a win. So by all means, go check that one out. And then the rest of the fantasy realm that I can go into, I've started rereading The Golden Compass. I have read it several years ago, probably around 10 or 12 years ago. And I was kind of like in the mindset of, aha, gotcha. This is why you're on the banned book list. This is why you're anti-religion and so forth. And so I probably didn't go into it with the best mindset. I went back to reread, partly for authorcraft and partly because they did a really good job. They've been doing a really good job with the His Dark Material series on HBO Max, as opposed to the very sad version of the movie, The Golden Compass, where they tried to cram too much in and banked too much on having sequels. And no, that didn't work out well. So if you saw the movie and you're kind of like, ick, check out the series on HBO Max. And by all means, read the books if you've never read them before. The story, for those who don't know, is about a girl named Lyra, who is kind of, she's not the nicest character in the world, but she's very relatable. So it's like she, makes up a lot of stuff. She's kind of a con artist in making, and she lives at this university called Jordan College. Her uncle, Lord Asriel, kind of just left her there while he goes off on adventures. She didn't know anything about her parents, classic fairy tale type stuff. And in this world, there are these little things called demons, Daemons. They're kind of like the soul or the consciousness of, the person that they're with. And so children's demons, children's demons tend to be more transformative. They take various animal shapes until they hit puberty, and then they become a fixed shape, kind of like personality, development. And so Lyra's demon, called Pantalaimon, or Pan for short, his favorite form is like the ferret or minx form, and then he will like turn into other things depending on the situation. Like if Lyra's in danger, he'll turn into like a panther or a leopard, and if she is nervous or excited, he'll turn into something else. She finds out by eavesdropping that Lord Asriel has found a connection, he feels, to other worlds through the Northern Lights, which is the main title of the whole series of his Dark Materials, through this thing called dust. Now, it's not like the type we brush away. This dust, it has many things. Some people think it's a good thing. Some people think it's a bad thing. And this is where that whole religion thing comes up, because the church and the magisterium in their world is very anti-dust. That's like the original sin, naughty, naughty. And dust seems only to settle once you hit puberty and your demon has been fixed. They're making that connection, trying to find a way to access this world. Everyone in the magisterium is like, no, we don't want that. That would be a bad thing. No. Mm-mm. So Lyra is curious. In the meantime, these kids are getting kidnapped by these groups called the Gobblers, Gobblers. And it's always kids that, are the lower rungs of society. So people think they're not going to miss them. Mostly they're taken from these groups of like wandering, migrant gypsy type. So when one of her friends gets abducted, she goes and she is trying to figure out what happened so that she can rescue him. She comes across this lady, Mrs. Coulter, who turns out to be very much connected with Lyra, though she didn't know it at the time. Mrs. Coulter is a very complex individual. In this book, she is definitely more of a villain. She does become more amoral as the series goes along. I'm almost finished with the second book, Subtle Knife. So, it's like she wants to find out. She wants to save these children from dust when they settle. So she has this organization that she's headed up called the General Oblation Board. Oblation, boys and girls, is a fancy word for sever. And the first three letters of the acronym, GOB, GOB, Gobblers. So if you've not read it, I won't go too much further so that I don't spoil it. But, it's like there's magical animals, not just the demons, but you've got, it's like the armored bears, Jorn Bergeson, which, it's like he's pretty cool. He's pretty awesome. You've got people from all over their world. And Lyra gets to see what other worlds are like, what our London and Oxford is like, as opposed to the one that she grew up in. Other characters get introduced, and it's very, very complex. There's witches who are more like on the amoral side of things. They're kind of like, they observe, they put their hand in when they feel it's absolutely necessary. It's like you can almost say they're like guardian angels at this point. It's like they're trying to help Lyra because they believe she's part of a prophecy to help the world as opposed to all these crazy adult humans that are trying to destroy the world. So there's lots of things and a lot of things to unpack, and I could probably do a whole video all on its own on his dark materials. I may just do that once I finish the entire series. But there you go. I had originally given it 3 bookmarks when I first read it, but I upgraded it to 4 because, I'm appreciating the whole thing whole lot more than I did before. So yeah, Golden Compass. If you've never read it, check it out. If you've been curious about it, check it out. My last book in the fantasy realm, I've been kind of thematic here. The Poppy War, Book 1 by R.F. Kuang. She is a young adult author, and she, from China, and she based a lot of her work off of aspects of Chinese history that are not necessarily well known to the Western world. And so this was very interesting. It's the story of this young girl named Rin. She's a war orphan who, she's had it kind of rough. She's pretty much been kicked around by her carers who, just like basically are running opium smuggling operation behind their store. And, it's just like, but she's smart and she's very driven and she wants to get out of the situation she's in. And she knows that the only way to do that is either get married, which she's not too keen on. They try to set her up with some old guy and she's like, no, not feeling that. There's got to be a better way to do this. So the only other way out of her situation is if she passes this test called the Keju, and gets accepted into an academy. Now, the majority of the upper level university institutions, they're very expensive, much like our colleges, but there is one that basically gives you free ride scholarship if you are in the top of the class with the Keju test, get top scores. And that is the military academy at Semigard. So Rin, it's like she's busting her rear end trying to memorize all of these things. She's got a tutor who's trying to help her, even though he's like, honey, you're going to be going up against kids that have been going to proper school their whole life. You've been just kind of getting bits and pieces and you're really good. You have a really good memory, but you don't have like a photographic memory. It's, I don't want you to set yourself up for a fall. But she's like, no, Karen, I'm going to do this. And she's like, she goes and does some pretty desperate, things to make sure that she stays awake and she's focused and she's studying. And sure enough, she gets top scores in her village, in her area, pretty much in the entire country, which everybody else is like, oh, she must have cheated. Of course, they would think that. But of course, Semigard says, yeah, we'll take you. We'll train you up, or at least attempt to. So she goes to Semigard, and it is very much, you could kind of compare it to the capital in the Hunger Games. Everybody is, very posh and out for themselves. And, she's kind of in the class where, everybody is like the son or daughter of a warlord, and there's only 2 other girls in her class. And so, it's like 3 girls to the entire dorm for girls. And they're like, wow, so you completed quota for us. Good job. Take that how you feel. The whole series kind of combines Chinese 20th century with the martial art combat, art of war from the 1300s to make for this very interesting series. So in her studies, which, she gets setback after setback, and she finally gets an in with one of the strategy teachers, because since she has no connection with any, like tribe or people, she has no problem, coming up with the worst case scenario that would be an end game situation to wars and strategy. And he's like, being cold and calculated is good, but you also have to think about what are the ramifications of the decisions that you make. But he's very intrigued by her and is considering taking her on. The other teacher that is interested in her is the lore master. He's very much, kind of reminds you of the Monkey King, kind of like the trickster god type character. It's like he really doesn't have much of a purpose in, based on first glance. He never shows up for classes. He, pulls pranks on the other teachers, and it's just very aggravating. Well, if you get accepted into the lore strata, you're basically kind of like the magical, journey type thing. You get trained in like all of the mythology and the lore, and you develop a power. Well, unbeknownst to Rin, she is one of the last surviving members of this clan that got pretty much annihilated, called the Spears. So she's a Spearly. There's only one other Spearly that she knows about, and it is one of the top students in the school, years ahead of her. And so when she goes through her trials at the end of her first year, she accidentally accesses this firepower from the Phoenix god in the pantheon, basically acting as its conduit. Was totally unintended, but yet it happened. And she nearly died from that experience. So the lore master is like, oh yeah, you come with me. I'm going to help you with that. She ends up gaining her training. Then the academy gets attacked. No, basically the whole country gets attacked by the Federation. And especially from this Bow Island nation called Mugen. Gee, I don't know what they could be referring to at all. Check out your World War II history, boys and girls. Basically, the academy gets wrecked. The surviving, graduate soldiers, from the academy gets assigned to divisions, and she gets assigned to this division that is kind of like the weirdos group. It's called the Psych, because everybody has some kind of supernatural ability. I don't know why she was surprised that she ended up in this group, but it's like the other Spearly's in that group, and he's the commander. And basically it's like, should you use your powers? Should you act as a god's conduit? Which, if you are a conduit for like the Phoenix god, it can be pretty devastating, because they'll just take and take and take from you to push forward whatever agenda you think you need to do. And there are some dire consequences for every time she, approaches this deity. But pretty much the fate of every member of the Psych, because they have these supernatural abilities, is that once they get used up or basically lose their mental functions, they get resigned to this mountain to kind of like keep balance between the gods and the mythological characters and the rest of the world. So it's very interesting. I'm not going to go much further so that you can check it out for yourself. It's got, it's like I see things like Hunger Games and Star Wars and all that stuff. And what's really awesome is that this author was 25 years old when she published this first book. Hot dang, that is awesome. And I like that there really isn't a whole romantic element involved. She kind of just like, no, I'm trying to build myself up. I'm trying to take care of myself. I'm trying to, be a good soldier for the country and things like that. She's so very driven. So that in itself is kind of refreshing. I give it 4 bookmarks. And, just like, I'm not giving it 5 yet because I haven't read the other 2 books in the trilogy. There are 2 more. I will be reading those and updating you on my thoughts on that one. So Poppy War. Yeah, that's a pretty good one. Very interesting. Okay, so those were all the fantasy ones that I read. Now I'm going to talk about some other ones that I read that are more in the adult area here. So in the grown-up book land, I read An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. Whew. Wow. I'll say this. I gave this one 3 bookmarks, and just because it was just so intense that after I finished reading this book, I had to like kind of lay down for a moment and just kind of rest my head, because, it really does reflect a lot of real world things going on. So it's about this newlywed couple named Celestial and Roy. And, it's just like they're kind of part of that self-made American dream and new South idealism. He's a young executive and she is an artisan who is pushing her way up out of Etsy and into her own corporate realm. And they were married for about 18 months. And yeah, it wasn't a perfect marriage. They were still going through their bumps and stuff when he gets wrongfully accused of rape and gets incarcerated and spends 5 years in jail for a crime he didn't even commit. So the story kind of splits between the 2 characters, and one, how he deals with being incarcerated. She's trying to be the supportive wife of a wrongly accused person, but the strain is a bit much on her, even though she knows that he's innocent. It's like, and has the family lawyer, working on the case, trying to get it appealed, and it ends up being successful, but it just took a long time. And in that time, it's like she ends up falling for her best guy friend, which kind of saw that one coming. She ends up becoming very successful, but she never talks about her incarcerated husband, to which you can see like the double-edged sword. If she doesn't talk about him or, help his cause, she's a bad wife. But if she does, then she's like, oh, you're one of those people, and tank her business. So, I mean, it's a catch-22. By the same token, you have Roy in jail, who is trying to navigate the inner politics of prison, ends up finding his roommate is kind of like the prison Yoda, turns out to be his father that he never knew, which that's a dynamic because his adopted father has always been the dad. He never knew his actual father. So that was something. And when he gets out of prison and he's trying to rebuild his life, and he's like hoping that he can get his life back with his wife, and he kind of knew that, things have kind of moved on, but it's intense. It's very intense. I mean, if you are interested in kind of real world drama, it's very much a realistic fiction story. By all means, go for it. I mean, this one, I only put it at 3 stars because I was just like, I was tired by the time I was done reading it. Because there was just so much to deal with and unpack. But no, generally, it was pretty good. Crime and Punishment by Theodore Dostoyevsky, because I was in the mood for heavy reading. This was on those book lists, it's just like, of all the classics that you could or should have read, Crime and Punishment was not one of them. I'm not as well versed in the Russian classics. So it became available on my Overdrive and I went for it. So for those that don't know, it's about this guy named Raskolnikov. He's this poor and desperate former student, kind of wanders through the slums of St. Petersburg. And he, it's just like, overhears how this pawnbroker that he has dealt with has been cheating people. And so he takes it upon himself to have his own moral justice. And he goes and he murders 2 people, the pawnbroker and her sister. Good guy. So, and then pretty much for the rest of the novel, it's him dealing with what he's done and how, it's just like, if I'm a great man like Napoleon, I can commit one small crime in the name of the good of the whole, and finds out, I'm not really a guy like Napoleon. No. And as he interacts with the other characters in the novel, his mom, the girl he's kind of crushing on, it's like his sister, and it's like all his colleagues, it's just like it's definitely a downward spiral of until he finally gives himself up and actually is relieved when he gets sent to Siberia. So, spoiler alert, it's crime and it's punishment. Again, as far as the psychological novel, it's because it's considered one of the first. It is very good for what it is. It would not play as well now. They very much pigeonhole the female characters in either the saint or the slut. There's no in between, and that's like no. So, which is its main reason why I give it 3 bookmarks out of the 5. I also read My Sister the Serial Killer by Oynekan Braithwaite. This is a story from Lagos in Africa. My Sister the Serial Killer is, as it is implied, it is a story of Korede and her sister Ayola. Ayola is kind of the beautiful femme fatale / Black Widow type character. It's like she gets phone calls from her. It's like, sister, he tried to attack me. He tried to kill me, and I killed him in self-defense. After that happens a couple of times, you do have to wonder what the deal is. After the 3rd time, her sister is like, what? She's helped her dispose of the bodies and clean up, and because the police are never going to believe a woman murdering in self-defense, right but she's beginning to wonder, and kind of like piecing the pattern together. Is like, oh my god, my sister is a horrible human being. Iolia is mommy's favorite, and she basically can look at a person and just win them over. And as soon as she doesn't find them useful anymore, the men in her life, they are no longer on the mortal coil. So things get complicated because Korede is a nurse at a pretty nice hospital, and she has a crush on one of the main surgeons there. This surgeon idiot who didn't realize that was totally into him. It's like, oh, but I just see you as a friend. Your sister's hot though. And as much as she, basically tries to steer him away from her and her away from him, it's not working out so well. Her only real friend in this whole business is this comatose patient that she talks to. And it's kind of like is how she unburdens herself, because her mom wants nothing to do with her, really. It's like, you take care of your sister. That is your job. And dad died of suspicious circumstances on his own, which is a whole nother level of story there. And things get real interesting when the coma patient wakes up. And while he doesn't remember the family members that, gradually stopped coming to see him, he remembers most of what Korede had been telling him. And he's quite a cool gentleman, because he's just like, listen, you're going through some serious stuff. I'll help you if I can. It's just like, I'm not going to say anything, but I want to help you because you're the only person that, gave a bother about me, while I was in my coma. So lots and lots of layers of this onion here. Holy cow. I gave this 4 bookmarks just basically because you didn't know how this thing was going to end until it ended. And you're just like, how are you going to get out of this one? And the fact that it's just a little over 225 pages, that's a lot of stuff that's been put into a very small compartment here. Kudos. So yeah, 4 bookmarks for that one. I did a little reading into the banned and challenged books. I always pick a couple every year once I finish my Pop Sugar Challenge. And so I read Stamped from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America by Ibram Kendi. That it was a lot. And it was very good. I gave it 5 bookmarks. I don't quite agree with all of the ideas, and it's mostly because I'm still unpacking a lot of it, basically about how racial ideas that people have today were based on events that happened throughout American history. Very fascinating. I understand why people would be uncomfortable with this if they're not there yet in their social development. I'm kind of glad this wasn't my first Black Lives Matter book that I read. I started out with other books like White Fragility and worked my way to this one. And I know he has an updated version of this. It was originally written in 2016, and a lot's happened since 2016. But very interesting. If you are looking to develop your understanding of racial equality and social justice, definitely worth reading or listening to if audiobook is more your jam. I would definitely recommend it. It's like, and it brings up a lot of talking points and a lot of opportunities to kind of like see where you stand on social issues, kind of like take a mental temperature of your social self. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Another book that is on the banned and challenged book is Go Set a Watchman by Harper Lee. And I was not intending on reading this book. It just happened to be available as an audiobook, and it was read by Reese Witherspoon. So they picked the right narrator for it. It came out in 2015, and there was a lot of hubbub about this book because, it doesn't paint Atticus Finch in a very positive light after To Kill a Mockingbird. Technically, this book was written before To Kill a Mockingbird. And in 1960, when she gave it to the publisher, he said, nope, this will not see the light of day if you leave it as is. You need to go and rework this. And you can kind of tell because there are some passages that are almost like a cut and paste type deal. Now, the reason why they brought this book out had to do with family and lawyer, kind of a money grab situation. So it's kind of icky on its own right there. It's just kind of like, but I will say, I give this 3 bookmarks basically because, if this was her first book, it is definitely weaker than To Kill a Mockingbird. But at the time when she wrote it, it would be considered very progressive because it's basically Scout, Jean Louise Finch, coming back home as an adult and just kind of seeing with a grown-up's eyes the things that she didn't understand so much as a child. And so you got the disillusionment, including Atticus being involved in this, committee that's against the NAACP. And, it's not Klan, but I mean, we're really kind of, heading down that spiral. And it's like right at the start of the civil rights movement. Brown versus Board of Ed just happened, and people are uncomfortable with that, and just all sorts of things per se, and just how Jean Louise is kind of trying to cope with all that and come to terms with this father that she's held up as the paragon of virtue, having some very serious character flaws. And how she's trying to reconcile her beliefs and the town's beliefs and, trying to figure out how to go forward. At the time, very progressive. If this was published now, it's not progressive enough, but you can appreciate it for where it was written in its original purpose. Again, not her strongest. To Kill a Mockingbird is much better, and you could leave it at that and be fine. I would say as a college class in social justice, it would be interesting to have that on the course curriculum and sociological classes, things like that. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't recommend this as high school text per se, unless you're doing like some advanced senior level class, because the things you're trying to instill into Kill a Mockingbird kind of clashes up against Ghost at a Watchman. But again, it has a lot of good talking points. It's just, whew, yeah, 3 bookmarks, just because the other book is stronger. And then my last book, yes, there is a last book. What is on my banned and challenged book list is Beartown by Frederick Bachman. And it's set in like the Scandinavian backdrop, very small town where ice hockey is king, okay? That is their bread and butter. They haven't had a good, solid team go into like the NHL or anything like that in over 20 years. And so you've got different narrators going on here between the high school team members, who are kind of like anybody who is in high school, and on the junior team pretty much can get away with all rule infractions, because they have such a promising future. Yeah. Things get complicated when, after their semifinal win, there's a big party, and the daughter of the team manager, 15 years old, decides to sneak and go join the party. And, drinking happens, and then there's a rape. And then, of course, you have all of the arguments when she does finally, confess, because she tried to just rationalize it out herself when her friend finds out, and he's like, you got to tell, you can't keep this to yourself. This is not okay. Nobody should have done that to you. It doesn't matter how much you drank or whatever. You said no, it shouldn't have happened. So when the guy gets arrested, the captain of the hockey team, it's the day of the finals, which they lost. So the town is pretty much in 2 camps here. There's the small camp of supporting the victim. And then there is the much larger camp of, how dare you victimize this poor young man and ruin his promising future. Yeah. I will say that the twists and turns in this story, parts of it very realistic, but there were some parts that surprised me too. And I was like, oh no, please don't tell me this is going to happen because of this domino effect. And then the way it ended, there was good catharsis. I thought it was a very good read. I gave it 4 bookmarks because, they're dealing with things that teenagers need to know about. And I don't think that this should be on the banned or challenged book list. I understand why, because of the sex and violence and so forth. But I think it's a necessary read, really, because, it's like these kids need to know how to deal. And if you think they aren't coming across these type of situations, then I'm sorry, you need to come out of the wonderland that you're living in. And saying, these kids know a whole lot more than what you think they know, and it needs to be addressed and talked about and dealt with and taken care of. I mean, good grief. Everyone in that town went through a whole lot because of one side versus the other. And so, I would say I would recommend this for young adult readers. Absolutely. It has many good talking points, things that that parents should be talking about with their kids, and, community should be talking about in general. So there you have it. Whoa. I Jolabokflod, y'all. So If you like these type of videos, please click like, subscribe, ding-a-ling the notification bell. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Merry Kwanzaa. Have a cool Yule. Jolabokflod. YOLO. Okay? And whatever you celebrate or don't celebrate, happy all of the things. Okay? Please take care of yourselves. Happy reading, everybody. And I will see you in the next video. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.